The Honda Odyssey could fit 8 kids comfortably, 10 in an emergency. Today, with 12 terrified children from the Westfield Soccer Club crammed into every available seat, Jennifer Martinez was redefining the word emergency. The cartel hitmen had expected to find a defenseless suburban mom. Instead, they'd awakened a DEA agent who'd spent 5 years infiltrating the most dangerous criminal organizations in North America. Now, with her daughter and 11 of her teammates depending on her, Jennifer had one chance to prove that soccer moms could be more dangerous than they appeared. The backseat was a chaos of soccer cleats, juice boxes, and frightened whispers as 12 kids aged 9 to 11 tried to make sense of why their Tuesday practice had suddenly turned into something from an action movie. Emma Martinez, Jennifer's 10-year-old daughter, sat in the front passenger seat, where she could see her mother's hands gripping the steering wheel with the kind of controlled tension that had nothing to do with normal traffic and everything to do with survival. "Mom, why are those men following us?" Emma's voice carried the kind of careful calm that children develop when they sense that asking the wrong question might make a bad situation worse. Jennifer glanced in the rearview mirror at the black Escalade maintaining a careful distance behind them, close enough to track their movement, but far enough back to avoid attention from other drivers on Houston's busy Southwest Freeway. 2 more vehicles had joined the pursuit, a white panel van that had picked them up near the Galleria, and a dark blue pickup truck that was attempting to parallel their route on the adjacent frontage road. "Just some people who made a mistake about who they think I am," Jennifer replied, her voice carrying the same soccer mom tone she'd used for 3 years to explain everything from why practice was canceled to why they couldn't stop for ice cream after every game. "We're going to sort it out, but first we need to make sure everyone stays safe." The truth was considerably more complicated than that, but truth was a luxury that Jennifer couldn't afford with 12 children depending on her to get them home to their families. The truth was that Carlos El Lobo Mendoza had spent 5 years and considerable resources tracking down the DEA agent who'd cost his organization $3 million in seized product and sent his younger brother to federal prison for life. The truth was that Special Agent Jennifer Martinez had been declared dead in a car bombing in Nuevo Laredo in 2019, allowing her to disappear into witness protection and become Jennifer Martinez, divorced soccer mom and part-time real estate agent in suburban Houston. The truth was that Jennifer had hoped never to use the skills that had kept her alive during 2 years of deep, undercover work with the Mendoza cartel. But today those skills were the only thing standing between 12 innocent children and men who viewed killing as a routine business expense. For 3 years, Jennifer had been the soccer mom that every other parent secretly envied. Her Honda Odyssey was always clean, her kids' uniforms were perfectly pressed, and she never missed a practice or game. She organized team snacks with military precision, managed the carpool schedule like a logistics coordinator, and remembered every player's birthday, favorite snack, and parent's phone number. She'd built the perfect suburban camouflage, complete with a small house in a family-friendly neighborhood, a part-time job that provided flexible scheduling, and a social life that revolved around youth sports, school fundraisers, and the kind of community activities that made her invisible to anyone looking for a federal agent who disappeared into witness protection. The other parents saw exactly what she'd intended them to see, a dedicated single mom who'd relocated to Houston for a fresh start after a difficult divorce. They knew she worked in real estate, that she'd moved from Arizona for better schools, and that she was always willing to help with team activities or cover carpool duties for parents who couldn't make practice. What they didn't know was that Jennifer's divorce was actually a cover story created by federal marshals, that her previous job in Arizona had involved infiltrating drug trafficking organizations that moved billions of dollars worth of product across the U.S.-Mexico border, and that the soccer mom, who organized perfect team parties, had once testified in congressional hearings about cartel operations that most Americans never knew existed. The transformation had been complete and carefully maintained. Jennifer Martinez, the soccer mom, drove a sensible minivan, shopped at Target, and worried about things like math homework and healthy snack options. Special Agent Jennifer Martinez had driven armored vehicles through cartel territory, carried weapons that weren't available to civilian law enforcement, and worried about staying alive long enough to complete operations that could dismantle criminal organizations, responsible for thousands of deaths. But today at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, those two identities were converging in the worst possible way. Carlos Mendoza had never forgotten a face, especially the face of the woman who'd cost him everything that mattered. He'd been 17 when the DEA agent, who called herself Maria Gonzalez, had infiltrated his brother's inner circle, posing as a money launderer with connections to Colombian suppliers. For 6 months, she'd been part of the family, eating at their table, celebrating birthdays, earning trust that had taken years to build. When the operation went down, it hadn't been just another drug bust. It had been surgical, precise, devastating. The DEA knew exactly which warehouses to hit, which phone lines to tap, which bank accounts to freeze. They knew because Agent Jennifer Martinez had mapped every aspect of the organization from the inside, providing intelligence that dismantled a network that had operated successfully for over a decade. Carlos's brother Miguel had been arrested in his own bedroom, dragged away in handcuffs while his wife and children watched. The charges were federal: conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, drug trafficking, carrying sentences that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life. The other family leaders had been taken down simultaneously, their operations destroyed, their assets seized, their carefully constructed empire reduced to nothing. But the agent who'd caused it all had vanished. Maria Gonzalez didn't exist. She'd been a perfectly constructed legend, complete with background, family history, and criminal connections that had been detailed enough to withstand the kind of investigation that cartel leaders conducted before trusting anyone with serious money or sensitive information. For 3 years, Carlos had used every resource at his disposal to find Agent Martinez. He'd hired private investigators, corrupted federal employees, and followed leads from Arizona to California to Texas. He'd been patient, methodical, understanding that finding someone in witness protection required the kind of sustained effort that separated successful criminals from those who got caught or killed. The break had come from an unexpected source, a facial recognition program that one of his tech-savvy associates had been running against social media, photos, and public databases. The soccer mom in suburban Houston didn't look exactly like the DEA agent who'd destroyed his family, but the bone structure was identical. The eyes were unmistakable, and the small scar above her left eyebrow was in exactly the same place. Carlos had conducted his own investigation, learning everything about Jennifer Martinez's new life. He knew where she lived, where her daughter went to school, where she bought groceries, and where she spent Tuesday and Thursday afternoons watching soccer practice. He'd been planning his approach for weeks, waiting for the right moment to settle a debt that had been 5 years in the making. Today, with Agent Martinez isolated at a soccer field with minimal security and maximum vulnerability, that moment had finally arrived. The attack had been planned with the kind of tactical precision that marked Carlos Mendoza as something more than a common criminal. He'd spent his youth learning from the best, military veterans who'd been recruited by cartels that paid better than government service, former law enforcement officers who'd discovered that crime was more profitable than justice, and international mercenaries who brought professional expertise to organizations that operated like military units. The team consisted of 6 men in 3 vehicles, each with specific roles and responsibilities. The primary assault team rode in the black Escalade, equipped with body armor, automatic weapons, and communications equipment that allowed them to coordinate their movements with precision. The secondary team in the white panel van was responsible for crowd control and preventing civilian interference. The Overwatch team in the blue pickup truck maintained tactical coordination and provided an escape route if the operation encountered unexpected resistance. The plan had been simple and should have been foolproof. Isolate the target at the soccer field during practice when she'd be focused on her daughter and surrounded by other parents who wouldn't expect violence in such a setting. Use the presence of children to prevent any heroic resistance. Few people would risk starting a firefight with kids in the line of fire. Extract the target quietly and efficiently, leaving no witnesses and minimal evidence. What Carlos hadn't planned for was Agent Jennifer Martinez's ability to read a tactical situation and respond with the kind of speed and precision that had kept her alive during 2 years of undercover work in situations where discovery meant immediate death. Jennifer had spotted the surveillance team before they'd reached the soccer field. The black Escalade with tinted windows and no front license plate, parked where it had clear sight lines to the practice area but no legitimate reason to be there. The white van that had been circling the neighborhood for the past 20 minutes, its occupants paying too much attention to the soccer complex and not enough attention to anything else. The pickup truck that had positioned itself to control the main exit route from the parking lot. She'd recognized the pattern immediately. Professional, surveillance conducted by people who understood tactical positioning but weren't familiar enough with American suburban life to blend in effectively. The vehicles were too new, too clean, too obviously equipped for purposes that had nothing to do with watching children play soccer. More importantly, she'd recognized the tactical signature. This wasn't random crime or opportunistic violence. This was a planned operation, conducted by people with serious resources and specific objectives, the kind of people who had reasons to find Agent Jennifer Martinez and settle old debts. Jennifer had approximately 90 seconds to devise and execute a plan that would get 12 children to safety without triggering a firefight in a parking lot full of families. The soccer complex was designed for convenience and accessibility, not security. Multiple entrances and exits that provided easy access for parents, but also made the area impossible to secure against determined attackers. The children were scattered across the field, finishing practice drills and collecting equipment, while their parents gathered near the sidelines to discuss carpool arrangements and upcoming games. Under normal circumstances, it would take 15 minutes for everyone to pack up, say their goodbyes, and head to their respective vehicles. Jennifer didn't have 15 minutes, and normal circumstances had just become extinct. "Emma, come here," she called to her daughter, using the same tone she'd used countless times to signal that it was time to leave practice. "We need to get everyone together." Emma jogged over with the unconscious obedience of a child who'd learned that when Mom used that particular voice, questions were discouraged and compliance was expected. "Is practice over?" "Practice is over for everyone," Jennifer replied, her eyes scanning the parking lot and noting the positions of the surveillance teams. "I need you to help me get all the kids to the van right now. But their parents will understand later. Right now we need to move quickly and quietly. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded, recognizing something in her mother's voice that she'd never heard before, not anger or impatience, but something deeper and more serious that made her stomach feel funny and her hands shake a little. Jennifer moved across the field with purposeful urgency, gathering children like a shepherd collecting sheep. "Practice is ending early today," she announced to the other parents, her voice carrying the kind of casual authority that had made her an effective team organizer for 3 years. "I'm taking everyone home in the van. We'll sort out the carpool schedule later." Most of the parents were grateful for the unexpected convenience. Soccer practice often ran late, and having someone else handle the pickup saved time and eliminated the usual chaos of coordinating multiple schedules. A few asked questions about the change in routine, but Jennifer deflected them with the kind of efficient cheerfulness that had characterized her soccer mom persona. "Emergency at work," she explained to Sarah Chen, whose son Michael was Emma's best friend on the team. "I'll have him home by 6 and I'll call you if there are any problems." Within 3 minutes, she'd collected 12 children and was herding them toward the Honda Odyssey with the kind of organized efficiency that would have impressed her old DEA supervisors. The kids complied without argument, partly because they trusted her, and partly because children were conditioned to follow adult instructions during situations they didn't understand. "Everyone in the van," Jennifer announced, opening every available door and starting the complex process of fitting 12 kids into a vehicle designed for 8. "Seatbelts on and stay low." "Why do we need to stay low?" asked Tyler Rodriguez, a precocious 9-year-old who'd inherited his father's tendency to ask uncomfortable questions. "Because we're playing a game," Jennifer replied, falling back on the kind of creative explanation that parents developed when the truth was too complicated or frightening for young minds. "It's called invisible passengers, and the rule is that nobody can see you through the windows." The children thought this was hilarious and immediately began competing to see who could scrunch down the lowest while still maintaining their seatbelts. Within 30 seconds, 12 kids had transformed a potentially terrifying situation into an adventure game, complete with giggling and whispered strategies for maximum invisibility. Jennifer started the engine and began backing out of the parking space, her movements casual and unhurried, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system like high-octane fuel. In the rearview mirror, she could see the black Escalade beginning to move, its occupants recognizing that their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. The chase was about to begin. The Honda Odyssey pulled out of the Westfield Soccer Complex parking lot at exactly 4:52 p.m., joining the steady stream of Houston traffic with the casual anonymity that had protected Jennifer Martinez for 3 years. To any observer, she appeared to be just another soccer mom heading home after practice, her minivan loaded with kids, who were probably arguing about snacks and discussing homework assignments. The black Escalade followed at a careful distance, its occupants maintaining professional surveillance protocols, while trying to avoid attracting attention from other drivers or law enforcement. They'd expected their target to panic, to make mistakes, to drive erratically in ways that would give them opportunities to force a confrontation. Instead, Agent Martinez was driving like a suburban mom with precious cargo, observing speed limits and signaling lane changes with the kind of defensive caution that marked her as someone who understood that 12 children's lives depended on her ability to stay calm under pressure. "Mom, are we really playing a game?" Emma asked from the front passenger seat, her voice carrying the kind of careful uncertainty that suggested she was beginning to understand that this wasn't entirely normal. "We're playing a very important game," Jennifer replied, her eyes constantly moving between the road ahead and the mirrors that showed her the tactical situation developing around her vehicle. "The rules are simple: stay low, stay quiet, and trust me to get everyone home safely." In the back seats, the other children were whispering among themselves, their earlier excitement beginning to fade as they processed the unusual circumstances. These were smart kids from educated families, and they'd all been taught about stranger danger and emergency procedures. They might not understand exactly what was happening, but they could sense that their normal world had somehow shifted into something unfamiliar and potentially dangerous. "Mrs. Martinez," said Katie Williams, a quiet 10-year-old, whose mother was a nurse and whose father was a police officer. "Is someone following us?" Jennifer glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Katie's face, serious and worried in a way that reminded her of her own daughter when Emma was trying to process adult situations that didn't make sense in a child's world. "Sometimes people make mistakes about who they think someone is," Jennifer replied, choosing her words carefully. "When that happens, the best thing to do is stay calm and let the adults sort it out." The white panel van had joined the pursuit, positioning itself one lane over and slightly ahead of the Honda Odyssey. Through the van's tinted windows, Jennifer could see the shapes of additional personnel, though she couldn't determine their exact number or equipment. The pickup truck was maintaining overwatch from the frontage road, ready to cut off escape routes or provide tactical support if the situation escalated. This was professional work conducted by people who understood vehicular operations and crowd control. They weren't street criminals or opportunistic predators. They were trained operators, working for an organization with serious resources and specific objectives, the kind of people who could afford to plan operations for months and execute them with military precision. Jennifer had two advantages that might make the difference between survival and disaster. First, she knew Houston's traffic patterns and road system better than visitors who'd been conducting surveillance from a distance. Second, she was driving a soccer mom's minivan through suburban traffic, which made her nearly invisible to other drivers and law enforcement officers, who saw exactly what they expected to see. Another parent dealing with carpool duties and after-school activities. The key was to maintain that invisibility, while maneuvering 12 children to safety without triggering a high-speed chase that would endanger innocent civilians and potentially result in the kind of collateral damage that cartel operators considered acceptable business expenses. "Everyone still playing invisible passengers?" Jennifer asked, her voice carrying the same cheerful tone she'd used during countless carpools and team activities. "Yes," came the chorus from the back seats, 12 voices united in their commitment to winning, a game they didn't fully understand but were determined to play correctly. "Good. We're about to get really good at this game." Jennifer changed lanes and merged onto the Southwest Freeway, joining the mass of vehicles that moved through. Houston like blood cells through arteries. Somewhere behind her, 3 vehicles full of professional killers were trying to figure out how to eliminate a federal agent without harming 12 children or attracting the attention of law enforcement agencies that took crimes against children very seriously. The hunt was officially underway. Agent Jennifer Martinez had spent 2 years learning to think like a criminal, to anticipate threats from people who viewed violence as a problem-solving tool, and to stay alive in situations where federal backup was hundreds of miles away and discovery meant immediate death. Those skills had been dormant for 3 years, buried beneath soccer schedules and PTA meetings and the comfortable routine of suburban life. Today, driving a Honda Odyssey filled with terrified children through Houston traffic while being pursued by cartel assassins, those skills came flooding back with the kind of clarity that marked the difference between trained professionals and ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. The Southwest Freeway offered multiple advantages for someone trying to evade pursuit while protecting innocent civilians. Heavy traffic made it difficult for the pursuit vehicles to coordinate their movements without attracting attention from other drivers. Multiple exit ramps provided escape opportunities that could be used to break up the surveillance team or force them to reveal their intentions. And the presence of thousands of other vehicles created an environment where law enforcement response would be rapid and overwhelming if violence erupted. Jennifer's immediate objective was to separate the children from the threat without triggering a confrontation that could result in casualties. 12 kids crammed into a minivan would be vulnerable in any firefight, but they also represented the kind of collateral damage that most criminals tried to avoid. Even cartel operators understood that harming American children brought the kind of law enforcement attention that made business impossible. The challenge was convincing Carlos, Mendoza's team, that continued pursuit would result in exactly that kind of attention. "Kids, I need everyone to listen very carefully," Jennifer announced, her voice carrying the kind of authority that parents reserved for emergencies and serious misbehavior. "We're going to play a new part of our game. When I say invisible, everyone needs to get as low as possible and stay there until I say visible again. Can everyone do that?" "Yes, Mrs. Martinez," came the unified response. 12 children who'd been trained to follow adult instructions during situations they didn't understand. "Emma, I need you to call your Aunt Rebecca," Jennifer continued, referring to her federal handler who maintained a Houston phone number for exactly this kind of emergency. "Tell her we're playing invisible passengers and that we need help with the rules." Emma understood immediately. Her mother had taught her this procedure 2 years ago, disguising it as a family safety plan, but making sure she understood exactly which number to call and what words to use. If their normal life ever became complicated, Rebecca would understand the coded message and initiate emergency protocols that would bring federal resources into play. Jennifer took the exit for Highway 59, joining the northbound traffic that would take them toward downtown Houston and the federal building where Agent Martinez had once worked before disappearing into witness protection. The pursuit vehicles followed, maintaining their surveillance formation, but beginning to show signs of tactical uncertainty as they realized their target was leading them into increasingly populated areas where violence would be difficult to contain. Jennifer's phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a call from Rebecca Santos, her federal handler, who'd spent 3 years pretending to be a divorced real estate agent's sister while actually serving as a U.S. Marshal, responsible for witness protection operations in the Houston area. "Having car trouble?" Rebecca asked, using the coded language they'd established for emergencies that might compromise Jennifer's cover. "Multiple flat tires," Jennifer replied, indicating that she was being pursued by several vehicles. "Need roadside assistance for 12 passengers. Location? Northbound 59, approaching downtown. Heading for the family reunion." Rebecca understood immediately. Jennifer was moving toward the federal building, bringing the pursuit into an area where law enforcement response would be rapid and overwhelming. The reference to 12 passengers meant that children were involved, which elevated the situation to the highest priority level and activated protocols designed to protect innocent civilians. "Assistance is en route," Rebecca confirmed. "Family members are very excited to see you." That meant federal agents and local law enforcement were being dispatched to intercept the pursuit and neutralize the threat. But it would take time for them to get into position, and Jennifer needed to keep 12 children safe until help arrived. "Kids, we're about to play the most important part of our game," Jennifer announced, her voice carrying the kind of calm authority that parents used when they needed children to follow instructions without question. "When I say invisible, everyone needs to get down and stay down no matter what happens. And remember, no matter what you hear or see, this is still a game, and games always have happy endings." The children responded with the kind of trust that came from 3 years of Jennifer's reliable presence in their lives. She'd never let them down during soccer practices, team parties, or carpool duties. They might not understand what was happening, but they understood that Mrs. Martinez would take care of them, the same way she always had. Jennifer changed lanes and took the exit toward downtown Houston, leading the pursuit convoy into increasingly urban terrain, where tall buildings and busy intersections would limit their tactical options. The black Escalade followed, its occupants beginning to realize that their target was leading them into exactly the kind of environment where law enforcement response would be rapid and professional. In the rearview mirror, Jennifer could see additional vehicles joining the convoy, unmarked, cars that might have been federal agents or additional cartel assets, pickup trucks that could have belonged to local law enforcement or criminal associates, and the general chaos that developed when a high-stakes pursuit moved through urban traffic. The situation was reaching the point where someone would have to make a decision about whether to escalate to violence or abort the operation. Jennifer was betting that Carlos Mendoza's team would choose to avoid a firefight in downtown Houston with 12 American children in the line of fire. She was about to find out if that bet would pay off. Special Agent Rebecca Santos had been expecting this call for 3 years. When the DEA had decided to fake Jennifer Martinez's death in place, her in witness protection, Rebecca had been assigned as her handler, specifically because she understood how cartel operations worked and what kinds of resources they could bring to bear when seeking revenge against federal agents who'd cost them money and family members. The call came in at 5:07 p.m., just as Rebecca was finishing paperwork at the federal building in downtown Houston. Multiple flat tires, 12 passengers heading for family reunion. In federal protection speak, that meant an agent under pursuit by several vehicles, children in immediate danger, converging on federal territory where tactical response could be coordinated. Rebecca initiated emergency protocols that had been designed specifically for this scenario. Within 30 seconds, every federal law enforcement agency in Houston knew that a protected witness was under attack and that children were involved. Within 2 minutes, FBI tactical teams were rolling toward downtown Houston, with instructions to intercept and neutralize threats to federal personnel and innocent civilians. The Houston Police Department received slightly different information: an armed kidnapping in progress, involving multiple suspects and a dozen children, moving northbound on Highway 59 toward downtown. HPD response was immediate and overwhelming, with patrol units, helicopter support, and SWAT teams coordinating to intercept what appeared to be a major criminal operation threatening children. Neither agency was told about Jennifer's real identity or her federal protection status, but both understood that the situation involved threats to children and required maximum response with minimal negotiation. The first units to intercept the pursuit convoy were Houston police patrol cars that had been positioned at strategic locations throughout downtown Houston, as the black Escalade, white panel van, and dark pickup truck followed Jennifer's Honda Odyssey. Into the urban canyon of downtown streets, they found themselves surrounded by marked police, vehicles with emergency lights activated, and officers ready to treat any aggressive behavior as an immediate threat to public safety. Carlos Mendoza's tactical team suddenly faced a choice between completing their mission and engaging in a firefight with local and federal law enforcement in downtown Houston, with news helicopters overhead and thousands of potential witnesses. For criminal organizations that relied on avoiding law enforcement attention, the mathematics were simple and unforgiving. The pursuit ended as abruptly as it had begun. The black Escalade pulled over at the intersection of Travis and Prairie, its occupants recognizing that continued pursuit would inevitably result in a confrontation with law enforcement that they couldn't win and didn't want to explain. The white panel van and pickup truck followed suit, their drivers understanding that the tactical situation had shifted beyond their ability to control. Jennifer continued driving for 2 more blocks before pulling into the parking garage beneath the federal building, where armed U.S. Marshals were waiting to provide security for 12 children, who had no idea they'd just been rescued from a situation that could have ended very differently. Invisible passengers. Time to be visible again, Jennifer announced, her voice carrying the same cheerful tone she'd used throughout the emergency. Game's over and everyone won. The children emerged from their cramped positions with the kind of excited chatter that followed any successful adventure, comparing notes about who had stayed invisible the longest, and debating the rules for future games. To them, the experience had been unusual but not traumatic, and an unexpected adventure that would probably become a favorite story to tell their friends and family. Emma Martinez, however, was old enough to understand that something more serious had been happening. She'd seen her mother's hands on the steering wheel, heard the tension in her voice, and noticed the way she'd been watching the mirrors throughout their drive. More importantly, she'd recognized the federal building where they'd ended up, remembering visits to Aunt Rebecca that had never quite made sense in the context of their normal suburban life. "Mom," Emma said quietly as federal agents began the process of documenting the incident and arranging for the children to be safely returned to their families. "Are you really a real estate agent?" Jennifer looked at her daughter and realized that their 3 years of peaceful, suburban life had just ended permanently. There would be no returning to soccer practices and PTA meetings, no more carpool schedules and team snack coordination. Agent Jennifer Martinez would have to disappear again, this time taking Emma with her to a new life in a new place, with new identities and new cover stories. But 12 children were safe. Their families would never know how close they'd come to tragedy, and Carlos Mendoza's organization had just learned that some debts were too expensive to collect. "I'm a lot of things, sweetheart," Jennifer replied, hugging her daughter with the fierce protectiveness of someone who had chosen to give up everything rather than risk the safety of innocent children. "But most importantly, I'm your mom and I'll always keep you safe." By 6 p.m., 11 children had been reunited with their parents, who'd been told that practice had ended early due to a gas leak at the soccer complex and that Mrs. Martinez had kindly offered to take everyone home. The parents were grateful for her help and completely unaware that their children had just survived a cartel assassination attempt that could have resulted in multiple casualties. The official story was simple and believable. A minor emergency had required early dismissal from practice, and one of the team moms had stepped up to handle transportation for everyone. It was exactly the kind of community cooperation that characterized youth sports programs across America, and nobody thought to question it or investigate further. Carlos Mendoza and his tactical team were arrested by Houston police on charges ranging from stalking to conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Federal investigators would eventually connect them to larger criminal organizations and cartel operations, but those connections would be developed through traditional law enforcement methods rather than anything that might compromise Jennifer's protected status. The arrest reports would show that local law enforcement had disrupted a criminal operation targeting local families, with no mention of federal agents or witness protection programs. Carlos would spend the rest of his life in federal prison, but he would never officially learn the true identity of the soccer mom, who'd cost him his freedom and his organization. Jennifer Martinez and her daughter Emma disappeared that evening, beginning the process of creating new identities and relocating to a new community, where Agent Martinez could once again become someone else entirely. The Westfield Soccer Club would be told that Jennifer had received a job offer in another state and had to relocate immediately, which was perfectly believable for a divorced real estate agent trying to rebuild her career. The other parents would miss her organizational skills and willingness to help with team activities, but they'd understand that sometimes life required difficult choices and sudden changes. A few would stay in touch through social media for a while, but eventually Jennifer Martinez would fade from their memories the same way that people do when they move away and start new lives. Emma would have the hardest time adjusting to another new identity and another new community, but she'd also learned something important about her mother during their afternoon adventure. She'd discovered that the woman who drove carpool and organized team snacks was also someone who could protect 12 children from dangers they didn't understand, who could stay calm under pressure that would terrify most adults, and who would risk everything to keep innocent people safe. Special Agent Jennifer Martinez was officially reinstated to active duty with the DEA, assigned to a joint task force targeting international drug trafficking organizations that operated along the U.S.-Mexico border. Her cover as a suburban soccer mom had been blown, but her expertise in undercover operations and cartel structures made her too valuable to lose to witness protection permanently. Emma Martinez became Emma Collins, enrolled in a new school in a new city where her mother worked as a federal consultant on cases involving organized crime. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was close enough for an 11-year-old who was learning to understand that her family was different from other families in ways that required careful explanation and absolute discretion. The other children from the Westfield Soccer Club continued playing soccer, blissfully unaware that their most memorable carpool experience had actually been a federal operation that had saved their lives and dismantled a criminal organization. They would sometimes ask their new team organizers why games weren't as well coordinated as when Mrs. Martinez had been in charge, but they had no way of knowing that their former soccer mom had been applying skills learned in federal training to the seemingly simple task of managing youth sports. Logistics. Rebecca Santos received a commendation for her handling of the emergency response and was promoted to supervise witness protection operations throughout the southwestern United States. Her success in protecting Jennifer Martinez while coordinating a complex tactical response had demonstrated exactly why federal agencies invested in long-term, protective relationships with witnesses who possessed critical intelligence about international criminal organizations. The Honda Odyssey was sold to a legitimate soccer mom in suburban Dallas, where it resumed its intended purpose of transporting children to practices and games without any involvement in federal law enforcement operations. The new owner never learned about the vehicle's history, and her biggest concern was whether the DVD player worked properly for long trips. The case became a study in federal law enforcement training programs, used to illustrate how witness protection operations could be compromised and how tactical responses needed to account for civilian safety in complex, urban environments. Jennifer's successful protection of 12 children, while evading a professional assassination team, was analyzed and incorporated into protocols for protecting witnesses who had been placed in communities where they'd developed genuine relationships and responsibilities. More importantly, the case demonstrated that federal agents didn't stop being federal agents just because they retired or entered witness protection. The skills, training, and protective instincts that made them effective in their official capacity remained part of their identity even when they were driving minivans and organizing soccer practices. Jennifer Martinez had spent 3 years learning to be a suburban mom, but when circumstances required it, she'd remembered exactly who Agent Martinez had been and what she was capable of accomplishing when innocent lives were at stake. The transition from soccer mom to federal agent had taken approximately 30 seconds, but the transformation back had been complete and permanent. The 12 children who'd been saved that afternoon grew up without understanding the full significance of their adventure, but they carried with them the knowledge that adults could be trusted to protect them even in situations that seemed impossible or frightening. They'd learned that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when circumstances demanded courage and quick thinking. Most importantly, they'd learned that heroes didn't always look like heroes. Sometimes they looked like soccer moms who remembered your birthday, brought the best snacks, and made sure everyone got home safely. Even when safely required skills that had nothing to do with youth sports and everything to do with protecting innocent people from those who would do them harm. 5 years later, Senior Special Agent Jennifer Martinez was training the next generation of undercover operatives at the DEA Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Her curriculum included sections on maintaining cover identities in suburban environments, using community activities as operational camouflage, and protecting civilian populations during blown operations. Her most popular lecture was titled, Deep Cover in Plain Sight Community, Integration for Long-Term Operations, and it featured a detailed case study of how a federal agent had successfully maintained a soccer mom cover for 3 years. Before using those relationships to protect 12 children during a cartel assassination attempt, the students never learned that the case study was autobiographical, but they understood the underlying principles. Effective law enforcement required genuine connections to the communities being protected. Cover identities worked best when they involved real service to real people, and the ultimate measure of success wasn't arrests or seizures but the safety of innocent Americans who never knew they'd been protected. Emma Collins, now 16 and a varsity soccer player at her Virginia high school, sometimes attended her mother's lectures as a guest speaker. She would tell the federal agents in training about what it was like to be the child of someone who'd chosen to serve others even when that service required personal sacrifice and constant vigilance. "My mom taught me that being a hero doesn't mean you wear a uniform or carry a badge," Emma would tell the young agents. "Sometimes it means you drive carpool and remember everyone's birthday and make sure all the kids get home safely. And sometimes when really bad people threaten really good people, it means you remember who you used to be and what you're still capable of doing." The Honda Odyssey had been replaced by a more practical sedan that reflected Jennifer's return to federal service, but she sometimes missed the minivan's spaciousness and the way it had made her invisible in suburban environments. More importantly, she missed the simplicity of a life where the biggest crisis was a rained-out soccer practice and the most complicated logistics involved organizing team snacks. But she didn't regret the choices she'd made that Tuesday afternoon in Houston. 12 children had gone home safely to their families. A criminal organization had been dismantled, and justice had been served in ways that protected the innocent while punishing those who threatened them. In her office at Quantico, Jennifer kept a team photo from the Westfield Soccer Club, showing 12 young players and their coach celebrating a tournament victory. Most of the children in the photo had no idea that their former team mom was now training federal agents, but they remembered her as someone who'd cared about them enough to make sure they always felt safe and supported. That photo served as a daily reminder of why federal agents did the work they did, why some sacrifices were worth making, and why the protection of innocent Americans justified whatever personal costs might be required. Agent Jennifer Martinez had learned to be a soccer mom, but she'd never stopped being a protector. When those two identities had been forced to merge, she'd chosen the one that served the greater good. Even when that choice meant giving up the peaceful life she'd built and the community she'd come to love. In the end, that was what service really meant. Not the uniform you wore or the title you carried, but the choices you made when ordinary people needed someone extraordinary to stand between them and harm. In Virginia, where federal agents learned to protect a nation, and in countless suburban communities across America, where parents trusted that their children would be safe, Agent Jennifer Martinez continued to serve. The soccer mom had become a teacher, the protector had found a new mission, and the woman who'd saved 12 children in a Honda Odyssey was ensuring that future generations of agents would be ready to make the same choice when their moment came. Some people retire from service. Others find new ways to serve. Agent Jennifer Martinez had discovered that protecting Americans didn't require a specific assignment or official authorization. It only required the courage to act when action was needed and the skill to succeed when failure wasn't an option. In Houston, Texas, where children played soccer safely and parents trusted that their communities were protected, that legacy lived on. And in Quantico, Virginia, where new agents learned what it meant to serve with honor, the legend of the soccer mom, who'd outrun cartel assassins with 12 kids in a minivan, continued to inspire those who'd sworn the same oath to protect and serve. The Honda Odyssey had been designed to transport families safely through suburban America, but on one Tuesday afternoon in Houston, it had become something more, a fortress on wheels, a symbol of protection, and proof that heroes could drive minivans and organize team snacks while carrying the skills to face down professional killers when innocent lives were at stake. Jennifer Martinez had learned that there was no real retirement from service, no final end to the oath she'd taken to protect American citizens from those who would do them harm. The uniform might change, the assignment might end, but the responsibility remained constant, to stand between innocence and evil, regardless of the personal cost. In suburban communities across America, where soccer moms drove carpools and organized team activities, The truth lived quietly in the background. Most would never face the choice that Jennifer had faced, but all carried the potential to be more than they appeared when circumstances demanded. Extraordinary courage from ordinary people. The 12 children who'd been saved that day grew up to become teachers, doctors, engineers, and parents, contributing to their communities and raising families of their own. They carried with them the knowledge that sometimes adults did remarkable things to keep children safe, and that trust was not misplaced when placed in people who understood the true meaning of service. Agent Jennifer Martinez continued to serve, in classrooms and in the field, training new generations of federal agents and occasionally returning to operations that required someone who understood how to blend into American communities while hunting the predators who threatened them. The lesson she taught was simple. Heroism wasn't about the badge you wore or the weapon you carried. It was about the choice you made when someone needed protection and you were the only one in position to provide it. Sometimes that choice was made in federal buildings by agents in tactical gear. Sometimes it was made in soccer field parking lots by moms in Honda Odysseys. Either way, the choice was the same, and the outcome was what mattered. Innocent people going home safely to their families, protected by those who'd sworn to serve something greater than themselves. That was the true meaning of service. That was the real definition of heroism. And that was why, whether she was Special Agent Martinez or soccer mom Jennifer, the woman who'd saved 12 children would always be ready to make that choice again, when circumstances required courage, skill, and the willingness to risk everything for people who might never know they'd been saved.